Welcome back, panelists here. Former Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson, Amy Walter, national editor of the Cook Political Report, our own chief foreign affairs correspondent here at NBC News, Andrea Mitchell, and Lonnie Chen, fellow at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University. Well, this is quite the morning, I have to say. I would like, we had this panel planned before all this, and it's perfect. Andrea, the president, it's a big deal. The president wants to make it the biggest deal of all time, obviously, as well. But put this in some perspective for us.
Well, it's a very big deal to get Baghdadi. It's arguable how operational he still was. He was on the run, clearly moving around. It's a tribute to U.S. intelligence and obviously the special forces. I think he could have praised them more vigorously before he thanked Russia and Vladimir Putin for, clearing the ground so we could move in unimpeded. But it does tell you that the Syrian Kurds were valuable allies. And the ground intelligence that we are losing by having withdrawn from the sector we withdrew from in Syria is a concern. And there are going to be a lot of questions about whether or not we're going to have that kind of ground intelligence. I don't understand the securing of the oil and why the president makes such a big deal out of that. We went overboard in the 90s saying we didn't go in and help free Kuwait after Desert Storm for the oil. It wasn't about the oil. It was about, international global interests. So for us to make it an economic argument is only going to fuel other counter narratives. I thought it extraordinary that he had not, after the operation was over, spoken to the Speaker of the House. That we are so broken down. The Speaker of the House, the Big Eight or the Big Four, those are the leaders that, as far as we know, he had not notified any Democrats.
Jay Johnson, before you were at Homeland, you were actually also a counsel at the Defense Department. So a lot of times you're being asked, is this legal type of things? Correct. And so the point is, a lot of operational details. You kept expressing surprise at how much detail the president was sharing. Explain.
Well, first, there's always the risk that in the first 24 hours after an operation, a lot of what we hear is inaccurate.
He seemed to think he was watching it. How much do you think he actually was watching?
Well, we do have some pretty good technology in the basement of the Pentagon, in the Situation Room, where you can see all of that. But Chuck, normally, and this wasn't just President Obama, I think it's his predecessors too, a presidential level address announcing a strategic success like this is, on my orders, we conducted an operation, we took out the leader of ISIS, we brought justice to him. Thank you to our men and women in uniform who put themselves in harm's way. God bless America. Over to the Pentagon for the operational details and the briefing from the secretary and the chairman and perhaps somebody in the intelligence community. So I thought that was extraordinary. But I do have to say, I was in the Pentagon on May 1st, 2011, the day we got bin Laden. And at, I think, 3:23, whenever we heard Geronimo, we got him, my first thought was the courage and the dedication and the professionalism of men and women in uniform who did put themselves in harm's way, just like today. And I think that's where the credit belongs. Mr. O'Brien refers to this as a win for the president. This is a reminder of the excellence of our military and our special forces. And it is a win for the country. But as you have pointed out, you can kill an enemy, but you don't defeat an enemy necessarily. So there's more to do here.
Geronimo was bin Laden, apparently. Jackpot was Al-Baghdadi. Lonnie, the president, I feel as if he's going to use this as a way to vindicate his point of view on Syria policy versus, frankly, most of his advisors, not just Republicans in Capitol Hill.
What this sets up as is the president wants this to be the single defining foreign policy moment of his presidency. In a presidency that's had a number of interesting moments, let's not forget, he went to Singapore to meet with Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea, and now you've got him sort of center stage. He wants this to be.
We needed a victory. He hadn't had a big victory
Well, this
yet.
is the principal argument for going into an election year, quite frankly. In terms of going forward, I do think that the argument that a lot of Republicans are going to make is, look, what made this possible was U.S. presence on the ground. ground. What made this possible was our strategic alliance with the Kurds. What made this possible was all of the great relationships we had in the region. And this was an operation, by the president's admission, that was 5 months in the making, 5 months of intelligence gathering, much more than that, obviously, but certainly working with forces on the ground. What's going to happen going forward if we reduce that footprint? Are we going to be able to continue to constrain ISIS and what they want to do? They still have aspirations going forward.
You know, Amy, though, I remember after the bin Laden capture and kill, there were plenty of politicians who said, great, okay.
The election's over.
No, we got him. No. Meaning, we got him. Now we can start pulling back. And then you would have these fights. I mean, my point is, the political world or the average voter is going to side with the president on this. Great, you got him. Let's go, pull back. We don't need as many troops over there. It becomes a harder argument that Lonnie's making to keep troops on the ground.
To keep troops on the ground versus keeping special operations on the ground. And I think that's the distinction that even many Republicans were making was this is not about thousands and thousands of troops in this region. This is about a very specialized group of smart intelligence officers and leaders who are there getting this for us. It is a smaller investment to do this rather than let it fall apart and then have to make a serious investment in literally putting American lives on the line in this area.
And the fact is, right now, Vladimir Putin is the commander of Syria. I mean, that's a big statement. You feel like he has now the most influence over the largest portion of Syria than anybody else. Because he has influence over Turkey, even though it's a NATO ally, and he has obvious influence with Iran and Assad. He has the political influence where we can no longer be the brokers at the table negotiating any kind of solution if there ever were going to be one politically for Syria. Putin will have his say.
Yeah, I think unquestionably, it's hard to argue, as the president does, that somehow the U.S. pulling back is something the Russians don't like. I think the Russians like the hegemonic control they have in the area, and certainly our withdrawal, even if we leave some small presence there, is still a win for the Russians. It's still a win for the Iranians. I have a very difficult time seeing how that would be the case, as the president argued.
Is it possible a year from now we couldn't do an operation like this, Jay, if we have pulled back as much as we may be pulling back?
Yes, it could become exceedingly difficult. What type of presence we have in Syria, Iraq, or Afghanistan is not actually a political judgment. It's a fact-based analysis of what you need in that region to deal with the threat that exists in that region. That's a fact-based analysis that our joint chiefs should be delivering to the civilian leadership. That shouldn't be a political debate necessarily. I agree with what's been said. You need a force sufficient to deal with counterterrorism purposes in these countries.
All right. I'm going to pause it here. When we come back, we're going to get to the other big news of the week: impeachment, Ukraine, and the Democratic race for president. Perhaps. Stay with us.